This is the Because Fiction podcast, where we chat about all things Christian fiction. I'm your host, author, and insatiable reader, Shatona Habit. Guys, we have back with us Jane Kirkpatrick. She's a favorite. Everyone knows it. I can just go on and on, but why should I when we can listen to her instead? Because let's face it, she's more interesting. So, welcome back, Jane. And you have another book in your Women of Cannon Beach series, book 2, with the enduring tides. I don't know why, but I just can't.
It doesn't really flow off your tongue. The original suggestion was with the enduring tides. I mean, without the with, it was just the enduring tides. And I said, that sounds like a documentary,
it does.
So we added with, but that it does make it not easily tripping off our tongues. But yes, it's with the enduring tides.
Yeah, someday I will get it set into my head. Okay, so with the enduring tides, I did it. Did you hear that?
Yes.
I got it.
Excellent.
I feel like Gracie Allen in that concerto for index finger, where she finally gets the scale and she doesn't go flat on the last note, and she's like, I got it, and everybody's cheering. That is the best scene, guys. Can I just say, you got to go find Concerto for Index Finger with Jose Iturbi on YouTube. Just go listen, because it is an absolutely adorable scene from the movie Two Girls and a Sailor. Okay, I did that. Now, love that. I love that movie. Anyway, so this series, though, this is it's all of your books, isn't it? All of your books took someone real and you just filled in the gaps, the big, huge, gaping gaps that nobody knows about, but we get to know a little bit about somebody, and then you just, am I right?
Yes, you're right. I have some nonfiction books, but all of the novels are based on the lives of an actual historical woman, and I try to research their life and, look at census records and ancestry and other kinds of documents, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, whatever. And if I'm really fortunate, I get to interview some of the descendants. And then I try to put the story together, trying to identify what are some of the highlights of this person's life and why is she worthy of remembering in this way? Why do people remember her? Because usually that's how I hear about them. Somebody says to me, oh, you need to write about so-and-so because they were so amazing. And so I get to journey to find out what was so amazing and hopefully discover what their lives were like that can help us and in this, contemporary time to be strengthened and encouraged too.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And I think that's why I love your book so much, is that beneath it all, okay, work with me, guys, here just for a second, but it's a little like biblical fiction. We have these little bits of information we know about these people, and that's all we know. We didn't live in that time, so we don't have cultural context. We don't know how they would have interacted with someone outside of this very small piece of a picture that we're given. We're given the piece that we need, but it's fun to try to understand how they lived and worked and died and all the things. And you kind of just do that with women in, like, I think everything I've read of yours has been American history. Is it all American?
And it's mostly, I have one set in Florida, which was a fascinating one, a journey about a woman. She and her husband founded Fort Lauderdale, but she helped negotiate the treaty between the United States government and the Seminole Nation when they came out of the Everglades. And so, the unanswered question was, how did that happen? That was a book called Mystic Sweet Communion, but most of them have been set in the West or on, women journeying to the West. And I don't know if that's because I went from the Midwest to the West, but I've been drawn to those kinds of stories, pioneering stories. I think the oldest in terms of time is like 1910, 1912. But most of the stories are in the 1850s to 1860s.
Yeah. I think All Together in One Place was not the first one I read, but it was one of the first ones. And I think it had actually been out before some of the other ones I had read even. But that one, I don't know, The Necessary Circle stuck in my head.
Yeah, I know. That was, I was struck by how why women didn't give up their long skirts. And then I read a doctoral essay or a doctoral piece from a woman in Kansas, I think she was. And she said that a woman would not start out on the trail with fewer than 7 other women. And that the reason for that was that when they got to that part of the world in the prairie where there were no trees, they needed these other women to hold out their skirts. They would stand in a circle with their backs to the middle, hold out their skirts, and then one at a time, each woman could enter that circle and take care of their necessary things. And I just thought that was so, I don't know, just so much of a sisterhood and so
Yes.
caring that they looked after each other in that way. And I'm sure it was kind of, a place where they gossiped and maybe they changed recipes and, they complained or whatever. But
Right?
yeah, it was a safe place. And I call that a necessary circle.
Oh, I love it. It's just so cool. Anyway, I that will stick with me forever. I mean, just like,
Oh, I'm glad.
and actually, my kids, there were a couple of times that we were off, and we had to pull over now, and I pulled those girls out, because hey, I have 7 daughters. I
Yeah,
didn't know about the 7 thing, but I had 7 daughters, and I'm like, all right, girls. Pull out the skirts. We got we're behind creosote bushes, but this is the desert, people.
yes,
There are no trees. There are the creosotes. Not all of them are tall enough to be any kind of, and you can see miles and
yes,
miles.
yes,
So
yeah,
I mean, so why not? I wonder if they remember that. It's just what the weird things that families have to do.
yeah.
I wonder if that's one of the ones that they're going, oh
I
yeah, I remember
know.
mom making us get out, or do they're like, mom, we didn't do that. And I'm like, oh yes, you did. I don't know which it is. I got to ask now.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, okay. So, book one, was that about the woman who actually became a postal?
Yes. So the sort of the anchor of all 3 books is a woman named Mary Gerritse, and she was one of the very first women who delivered mail on the North Oregon coast. And I don't, people see pictures of the Oregon coast and so on, and the north part from Astoria south about to, just south of Cannon Beach actually is very, very rugged. And she had to go up over mountains. She had to cross areas that were very, very narrow with her horse, and and she did that while she had 4 children and was married. Her husband, he may have gone along with it reluctantly, but he did, and it was her saving grace, really. She had 4 children. I think there were 4 children under 6 really quickly, and she was overwhelmed with being a mother. And I think her survival depended on her having alone time, which is what she had with her horses and delivering the mail. And so first the first book is really about coming to grips with the challenges that a young mother might have had and working out the possible routes to deal with that with your husband and with your kids, and what could be the long-term consequences of that, and what could be the great joys involved in that.
Yeah, I really love it because I mean, we're not necessarily talking about a postpartum depression, but it comparably, when, especially, I like to call it in the trenches, when all those kids are little and you are it and you have no clue what you're doing, you're just winging it. All mothers are winging it, even with lots of help, we're still winging it because
Yeah,
our kids are different,
exactly.
and you just it I remember getting to the point where, speaking of little dresses, my kids, I had one daughter. I could finish a dress right now, put it on her, send her outside, and in less than 20 minutes she would be in, and there'd be a big L tear in the skirt
Yeah,
every single time. And I got to the point where I had to sew things for other people just so something left my house, and in my mind it stayed perfect. I never saw the destruction. So it's a little similar. She
yeah.
needed something to accomplish that she could say, this is done, because dishes and laundry and child training and cooking and all the things are never, ever done.
Right. And I
Because
think,
technically male isn't either, but it is sort of.
yeah. And she was a storyteller in her way. She loved words. That we know that she was actually a poet, and we were able to find some of the poetry that she wrote. she was really engaged in the landscape of this incredible, these mountains and these ridges, but also the challenges of an ocean. Because at that time, a lot of the roads were just the beach. And
Yeah.
so you had to depend on the tide, and if you didn't pay attention to what was happening with the tide, or if you got into a, they used to call them sneaker waves, could be thinking you're getting along just fine, and then this wave comes in. And one of the things I learned in talking to people who grew up on that part of the coast is they said you never turn your back on the ocean. You always are either riding and looking with that ocean to your side, but you never turn your back on it, because you never know when it's going to come in as a wave that picks up a log from somewhere and rushes you. And every
Yeah.
year we read something in the coastal papers about someone who got taken from one of those sneaker waves. So she had danger, but she also was just she had a great spirit. That's what I like to think. It was a very can do, I'm going to do this. And through that process, she actually, is sort of a legend in the communities along the coast because of what she accomplished.
Oh, so cool. It's just such a fascinating woman. I love how you find these people.
I know. This one was a fan, a reader of one of my books, or several of my books, but 10, now it's almost 15 years ago, she came to a book signing. She had to drive like about 2 hours, and she came to the book signing. It was at the Lilac Gardens. It was a book called Where Lilacs Still Grow. And
I love that
he
one.
said, I have your next book. And I went, oh, that's really sweet. But I think you should write that story. She just loved this story of Mary. And I said, no, you should write that story. You're the keeper of it. You're the one that's been researching. And she said, no, no, you have to write it. And I said, well, I have these other stories that are clawing at me, so I've got to do those. And I really never imagined that I would ever really write this. But about 5 years ago, when my husband's health really deteriorated and I knew that I couldn't travel as much to do the research like I'd like to do, she was still in my life. She and her husband would, they would send me tickets to do the cottage tour at Cannon Beach, or they would send me, stories about Mary and copy her interviews and so on. Anyway, I thought, well, maybe I could write shorter, maybe do a 3-book series, but make them a little shorter. And Susie Winchend is her name, Susie and Colin. She was just a wizard with research, and I thought, if she can help me do the research, because I'm not going to be able to go to the coast very much, maybe I could do this. And I suggested that to Revell, and they said, well, that sounds interesting. And then they are the ones who said, let's call it The Women of Cannon Beach. So we're not just talking about Mary. And that turned out to be a great idea. And I have to say that there were a lot of other women that I would then research, that we researched together. But I also had the privilege, I call it a privilege, of creating what I call fully imagined characters. So they're just characters that I made up in my head
Right.
to be friends, or to be, challenges, or something that would interact, that hopefully helped convey the desires and the goals and the challenges and the faith that got people through because they had these friendships. So the combination has been really, really fun to do. The second book, With the Enduring Tides, the second book in a series. I don't know if you've done series, but
Yeah.
I've done a few in the past, but it's been quite a while. And the second book is always kind of a challenge, because you need to carry on what happened in the first book, but you don't want to introduce too many new characters in the second book, because people need to keep falling in love with them. And so they have
Right.
to have time to do that. And you have to have some unfinished business so that you can, hopefully, they'll carry on in the third book. And I'm hopeful that I did that. I went to several book groups who had read Across the Crying Sands, the first book, and they would say, what happened with Olivia? And I'd say, well, you'll have to wait till the second book. Oh, They were. And one group, the woman told me that she and her husband were reading the book and they got so irritated because they would get frustrated with whose bookmark was where, that they bought a second copy. And so they both were reading the book together at this, sort of together at the same time. And after the book group, her husband said to me, "Oh, so what happened with Herbie?" And his wife said, "She won't tell you. You have to wait until the second book." So that was great, great fun, and I hope that I've accomplished that I answered those unanswered questions from the first book, but also leave some unanswered questions for the third book. So that
I love it.
the second one is kind of a challenge, and I hope that I've met the challenge.
Oh, I love it. It's really funny. I remember you telling me about that couple. And so in my, which book was it? Was it Clock Tower? I think it was in Clock Tower. I actually had two characters buy their own copies for that reason. I was like, that's it. These people need to be on the page. So this is what so I was like, because why not?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So much fun. Okay, so what's going to happen in this? I mean, the first one we got to talk about. Yeah, we did, but we got to read about Mary and her struggles and her triumphs and all those things. But what do we see in this one?
Well, in some ways, this is a book about identity and finding out who we really belong to. And another corollary to that is, what do people call home, and where do we gain our strength from in some ways, and how does home that's a safe home feed that and give us comfort. So Mary and John are married, they've got their kids, and one of the big challenges is that she's got kind of a wayward adolescent. She's 12, Belle, and Belle really wants to go and live with her grandparents, who have moved to the Willamette Valley in a place called Shoals Ferry, which is south of Portland. And there's some, irritation on the part of Mary and her husband about why can't kids just, why do they have to keep challenging everything? And so they make a decision to allow her to live with her grandparents. It was going to be just for the summer. And and meanwhile, her mother, Mary's mother, has been having some emotional problems, some mental health problems. And so her father hires someone to take care of them, to help. And so Virginia is a new character who is someone that is trying to find her own way. And she has a daughter, a young daughter, who from some trauma is able to hear everything but is not talking. And so Belle becomes somewhat of a mentor for her. And meanwhile, Mary's family begins to sort of disintegrate. And she has to come to grips with how she's going to try and hold this family together. There are other characters who are still struggling. Jewell, many people asked, what happened to Jewell in the end of the first book? We didn't get to see her very much. And I have to say that when I started writing the second book, I had the same question. Well, where has Jewell been? she's the Native American woman in the series who's really kind of my editor said she's always very soothing when we have those sections with Jewell. And so
Love it.
Jewell was also sort of looking for her family and her home because her father was Finnish. And there were a lot of Finnish people who came to the Oregon coast, partly for the lumber industry and partly for fishing. But there were quite active Finnish communities, and they often intermarried with Native American women. So we'll find out more about Jewell's life. And then I guess the other big journey is an elderly woman who, again, another woman who lived on the Oregon coast, who her name is Henrietta, and she spends most of her life there raising a grandchild. And so there are all these kind of interesting people who find their way together and find ways to support each other with the challenges that come their way. It's also part of the journey that Mary discovers some things about her birth family, and also the strangeness of how she ended up with the family that she's with. She had suspicions that she might have been adopted, and those suspicions are not exactly resolved in the second book, but they are investigated. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, my brain was going with explored.
That's good too.
So we're on the same track, even
Yeah,
though you wrote it and I'm just trying to figure it out as I go here.
yeah, yeah.
Ah, I love it so much. I love what you do with women, and I love that you acknowledge their strengths and their weaknesses. You do that really well. So a lot of fiction that focuses on the strengths of women tend to like downplay the fact that we're human and we have our own weaknesses too. We're not I am woman, hear me roar. We're
Right.
I am woman. Period.
Yeah.
Exclamation point. You know, and that's okay. We don't have to be the end all, and yet we are stronger than we give ourselves credit for sometimes, and we're allowed to be weak, and you show that so well. I love it.
Well, I think that that helps people relate to the characters because if we're honest with ourselves, we do have those, not even blank spots. They're just spots that we struggle with. Sometimes it's unworthiness, sometimes we get annoyed, sometimes it's our controlling part of our personalities, it's our obsessiveness, and we don't always choose the best route to deal with our weaknesses, but we also, every one of us has a strength. Every one of us has a way of drawing on what, Virginia Satir was a family therapist in the 50s and 60s, and she said that she saw families as this kind of big black cast iron pot with little feet on it, and that whenever anything that was really good happened, it would go into that pot. And the ideas and the feelings and so on, and you fill up the pot. And you did that because when life got tough, or when you realized, oh, I really screwed up with this, you would go to the pot and be able to pull out the love and the care and the trust and the faith that you had been putting in there. And many women struggle with filling that pot, with really actually giving ourselves permission to notice when we have done things well and our strength is
Yeah.
showing. And so, sometimes if we don't fill the pot, we try to go there when things get tough and it's dry. There's nothing in there, and that makes it really hard to keep going sometimes.
I think we've, as a culture, we've done ourselves a strength and a disservice at the same time, because we have this attitude of, if you basically, even in your own head, if you acknowledge you've done well, then you are being prideful, and all the things that go with that, full of yourself, all the things. And it's not true. Acknowledging you did something well is just being honest.
Right,
Boasting about that is a totally different animal.
right.
Going around and making the whole world hear about how well you did, that's a different story than acknowledging, hey, I did a good job there. I really like what I did there. That worked. It worked well. And hey, and you can give God the glory while still acknowledging that you did it well. It
Absolutely.
doesn't, those are not mutually exclusive, but our culture, particularly with women, and it's really funny because sometimes I can sound like a raving feminist to some people, and I'm probably as unfeminist as you can get. But I don't think you have to be, you know, just all in, men are evil, women are king, to acknowledge the fact that we have especially created a virtue in women not being recognized for what they've done. And that's terrible, because there's a reason why sometimes women are the better choice for a project. Our brains often, not always, my brain works more like a man's most of the time. It's just how God created me, and that's fine too. But there are general, women tend in this direction, men tend in that direction, and they cross over a lot in the middle. But we have this idea that if a woman did it, that, well, why did it work? Well, because sometimes our strengths are what is needed. Okay. I'm just like,
Well,
I had to get that out there.
I like the expression that Paul had, that everybody has gifts differing, and
Yes.
that the whole body is important, that the feet are important and the arms are important and all these things, and that's what makes it makes a community, what's what
Right.
makes a congregation, and that all those gifts that are different, but they all are honorable, and ought to be people ought to be able to use them and not have to feel that they are being prideful. I think that's
Right.
really a good way, your characterization of that we tend to think, oh, but yes, not boastful, but and not prideful, but honoring the fact that we were given gifts.
Right. And being honest about it.
Yeah.
Because it is a lie to pretend that you didn't do well. That's a lie. Why do we like almost honor someone's lie instead of the truth?
Yeah. I don't
I
know.
don't, it's just,
I
anyway.
don't
Okay,
yeah.
speaking of all this, let's go into faith. What are we going to see faith wise in this book since we're talking about
So
Paul?
faith-wise, I think a big part of this second book is Mary struggling with who does she belong to as she sort of explores or investigates who her family really was. Did she have a birth family? Maybe she, and the sort of give away the story, but she explores that and struggles with how did that come about, and who does she belong to, who are her people. And it's her belief that she is a child of God that really is what helps her move through that, the hard part of the investigation, the painful part of the exploration, if you want to look at it that way. Henrietta, who has this grandson, and she's got children that have been wayward. She struggles with, how did this happen? How, what kind of a mother was I that I've got these adult children who are not being responsible? They're not looking after their kids, and now I've got a grandson that I'm trying to raise, and maybe I'm the worst person in the world to do that. And I think the faith experience for her is to realize that sometimes when we're in another life stage, it doesn't mean that we can't learn new things. And
Right.
she discovers some of those new things. I think that one of the people that people really loved learning about was Herbert, who was a remittance man. They were British people, usually second sons, who were sent away from England because they couldn't inherit and they didn't really want them hanging around. So they would pay them a certain remittance every month to stay away. Herbie Logan was quite an entrepreneur. He got his remittance, but he also earned money and built a hotel, and he was instrumental in getting a road built, which was critical for the development of Cannon Beach. And he has a long lost love. And at the end of the first book, people are greeted with Olivia, who is making her way. Mary is helping her. She's traveling with her from Tillamook to Cannon Beach to meet up with Herbie. And so the two of them are struggling with, what is this relationship going to be like? And Herbie's got some health problems, some of which he caused himself. And so their journey is, how do I let somebody help me? And does that mean I'm weak, or does that mean I'm strong enough to let someone help me?
Right.
And if we think about Jesus' work in his work, and Jesus in our lives, that to accept the love that Jesus has for us is not a weakness, but a great strength, to be able to acknowledge that. It sort of goes back to that, what we were just talking about, to accept that we're worthy, that we have a gift, and that God loves us whether we mess up with that gift or not. And then Mary and John, of course, with their kids. How does Mary how to come to terms with this family and with her young daughter, who towards the end of the book faces a particularly horrendous trauma, which really did happen in Belle's life. And the the documentation from the court records and so on were really kind of hard to focus on. But I think that very often in our lives we do have some terrible trauma that happens to our children or to our spouse or other people that we love. And it's sort of, what do we draw on, where does our faith help support us and sustain us, so that we can be the helper or the giver that we're called to be.
Oh wow. I just thought of it. Um, Mary is struggling with her identity as a daughter, But
Right.
she's also struggling with as an identity as a mother if her daughter is wanting to go.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. That would be a tough one to be handling at the same time. I'm just saying.
And she's got an ill mother, so she's really, it's the sandwich generation that people talk
Yeah,
about. She was dealing with what a lot of women are dealing with now. And then John, who takes jobs to earn money, but often he's gone for 2 to 3 months at a time. He works on board a ship. And so I think of it as sometimes families where there's a deployment, and they're
right.
military families, and they've got to hold down the roost. And at the same time, then this other person returns, and then they have to readjust again that relationship and that family relationship. So I hope I've sort of touched some of those contemporary struggles that people have by looking at how did people deal with that in the 1890s and the early 1900s.
Oh boy. That just bless her. Basically, guys, what she's done here is what all authors have to do. We take a character and we're like, how can I torture her? Oh, that's not enough. Let's give her some more. Oh no, just we need to add it. That's just a little too mild. Let's just,
That's
I mean, sometimes it would be a blessing if we would just like, I don't know, kill off the character so they don't have to go through with what we put them
Well,
through.
somebody said when I was starting to write, they said, "Well, fiction is you give a character a desire, and you put them up. Let's say you give them a desire to climb a tree, and so they climb a tree, and then you get other characters to come along and throw rocks at them, and
Yep.
eventually they come down, and that's the end of the book."
Right?
Okay, but one thing when I think about that I've thought a lot about in writing is that what we're really creating are the barriers or the struggles to help create a character. And the word character in the Greek means to chisel. And so part of what we want to do is create those challenges that chisel a person's character. So, and if we get to the end of a book and we say, well, I don't know if that really happened. I mean, I'm sort of questioning that I think then, when somebody reads my manuscript and that's sort of their questioning about that, I think that I haven't done a good job of creating the barriers or the rocks that people have to crawl over that will carve their character, that will chisel their character so that a reader believes that, yes, this character wanted to do X and all these other things got in the way, but as a result of their handling those challenges, their character has been deepened and changed, and that becomes the character that we want to remember.
Ah, that is a great way of putting it. I did not know that about chiseling. Now I have to go after my friend and say, "Hey, how come my Greek friend? How come you didn't tell me?"
Yeah, just I when I came across that, it was like, oh gosh, that's so perfect because it's really, and I would tell groups that I spoke to that if I asked someone to tell about a time when they were strong, they would probably tell a story about a time when they were challenged and
Yeah,
and how they overcame it. And it's that shaping and chiseling and struggling. And it's why I don't like soap operas particularly, because those people are never chiseled. They have perfect
right,
skin. They never,
right.
their problems are not that great, and they don't learn anything from their problems. So they're really a more shallow character than what I hope that a good story has for us. I mean, they have their other problems because they're recurring characters and they can't change too much because they might lose their they might lose their job in that soap opera. But
Right.
and whereas a novelist, can actually make those changes and help a character grow if that's part of what our hope is.
Ah, I love it. Ah, so cool, so cool. Okay, so this book came out. This is we're recording early, guys. This book came out on April 21st, so it's fairly new.
Hmm.
It is. It that means it is still. Come on, Chitona, get your brain in gear. Reverse, rewind. There we go. Uh, you can still get it on Baker Bookhouse at 30% off with free U.S. shipping. And the first book I checked, you can also still get that one for 30% off with free U.S. shipping. Just saying. And
Great.
so that is cool. When does book 3 come out?
Well, initially it was going to come out the end of this year, but I mentioned earlier my husband passed away, and it really even though he was 95 and he had lots of health issues, and we had 50 years together. But I have to say that it's been really hard to write the third book, and my editors and publisher have been so gracious. So now it looks like the third book will come out in March of 2027. So just about a year, just the same sort of pacing of the first book to the second book to the third book. But this is the first book that I've had to write without him in my life. And he was my greatest cheerleader, but he was also had this incredible memory and an incredible depth of information. So if I had a weapons question, or I had a horse question, or I had a geology question, or I had a how to build X, Y, or Z question, he could answer that. And now I have to look it up and try to
Right.
find it. So it's been a little slower, but it's also, I do feel his presence in my life and with this writing. But it I just had to ask for a couple of extensions to get the third book finished. So, and my publisher Revell and Baker were very gracious about that, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
It is so hard to write when life is upside down. I
Yeah,
mean, it's hard to write, period. And then it's even harder to write when things are, constantly shifting and changing, and you've got a lot going on. That's tough. But when everything has been upended,
yeah.
you've got to, like, it really feels like you are hanging from a bungee cord, trying to keep your laptop close enough that you can type while hanging upside down in the air. You're just like, it's just not the same, and it's really frustrating.
It's sort of a dichotomy, because it is exactly what you just described. And at the same time, when I would actually sit down to work on the book, I I felt engaged. I felt alive. I felt like I can do this. It's going to be okay. I mean, I felt the presence, and I felt God's presence in my life. And I felt his presence, that, I could hear him in the background saying, when I would say, "Oh, this is so terrible." And he'd say, when he was helping me write, he would say, "Oh, that's earlier in your process than usual. You always get to that place where you think it's terrible, but this is earlier," or something like that. And I'm trying to sort of remember some of those really kind things he used to say that kept me going. So, it's like it was hard to write, but it was also, when I was writing, I felt really close to him. So I hope that resonates with readers. And that book is called Beyond the Breaking Waves.
Oh, I
So,
like it.
yeah.
I like it. And the first one was shifting
Across
sands,
across the crying sands,
crying sands.
yes, and then with the enduring tides, and I guess that really is a metaphor for how these women managed their lives. They kept enduring despite the challenges. And then beyond the breaking waves is really a way of looking at, how do you get past that, and what's the next thing? What's the next part of our journey when there've been maybe major challenges or major losses.
Ah, so good, so good. I'm so excited. I can't wait. Mine isn't here yet, but it's not April 21st yet, so I'll just be drumming my fingers.
Mine isn't either, so I haven't seen it either.
Ah,
I have a mo
no.
I have a mock-up book, where they put the cover on somebody
Right.
else's book so that you can take a picture of it
Yes.
with you holding it, and I have that, but I don't have the book yet, but it's on its way, I've been assured. So,
I have for my books, I have literally printed out my cover on 8.5 by 11 paper, and I've folded the edges around another cover and
yeah,
held it like that.
yeah, exactly. We do what we have to do.
Right? Because important things, people, important things.
Yeah.
Ah, so cool. So cool. Well, Jane, this has been a blast. I always love talking with you. I'm still hounding you. Don't forget Juana Briones. She needs her story told. And hey, it worked for someone else. I'm determined it will work
I
for me
know,
too. I
it's
need to get a
true.
hold of this gal. I'm going to go back and find her name and stalk her and say, okay, what do I have to do to make this happen? She knows the formula,
Yeah,
man.
she's got it.
Oh, I love it so much. I love it. Anyway, and yeah, I hope you will come back and tell us all about that book next year. I will continue to be praying for you.
Great.
And I am so grateful that you write these stories that just really resonate with us because we need more of them.
Well, I appreciate your attention to it and that you let the stories feed your spirit. I'm grateful for that.
So excited. Meanwhile, guys, I'm going to say, have a good day. Go read these good books. You have time to read both of these books if you haven't started the first one. Plenty of time before the next one comes out. I'm just saying. And don't forget that you can get them at Baker Book.